welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In the series on basic sociology, we are trying to understand the concept of social inequality. And in today's lecture, we are going to understand how family as an institution leads to the production and reproduction of inequality. So in sociology, the family has been studied by functionalist approach as something which leads to consensus and social order. And according to the functional school, families are the primary institution for raising children, and family experiences play an important role in shaping children's life chances. So when as sociologists we studied family and used a functionalist approach, the focus was on the process of socialization. Socialization is a process which could teach norms, values of the society, and in that sense it expected the children to be following the norms and leads to consensus and social order. So after the Industrial Revolution and 1960s, 70, major changes happened in family as an institution, and that is a time when sociologists turned their attention to look at the way in which some of the inequalities are coming in from the society or from the family structures itself. So the feminist analysis trying to understand family as an institution considered family as the breeding ground. It was there in the institution of family where inequality was being reproduced, and that is why it became important across society, starting from the industrialized Western society, to look into the family structure as a mechanism which led to the reproduction of inequality and poverty. So now when we look into inequality, it is not only inequality of gender, but also inequality of race, inequality of class, and they are kind of connected to each other. So therefore, the overall analysis of family structure helps us to understand how family is not only functional, but it is also dysfunctional in many situations. Now here in this lecture today, the focus is to understand the family structures with reference to the case of USA. We will be referring to the particular study, case study of the family structure in US in the late 20th century, which was a time when there was an increase in income inequality, and this income disparity or the inequality in income stimulated interest in the extent to which other types of social inequalities also increased. So we have not kind of looked at inequality as something which is kind of only separate or disconnected with other types. So there are multiple types or multiple forms of inequality. Income inequality would be in terms of your wage structure, in terms of your earning, and if the earning is different, so the gender relation, the class relation and racial relations are also impacted. So the entire focus to have a holistic understanding of family at the center and try to understand how it has implication for income inequality, gender inequality and other forms of inequality. So this lecture is basically discussing the article Family Structure and Reproduction of Inequalities by Sarah McLennan and Christine Perseski. The two authors have done extensive study, primary data and secondary literature review to understand the family structure and the way in which or how family structure is a mechanism for reproduction of various forms of inequality. McLennan and Perseski argue that family structure has become an important mechanism for the reproduction of class, race and gender inequalities. The authors have reviewed studies of income inequality and family structure changes and found a wide range of estimates of the correlation. So if income changes, then there will be a change in the structure of the family. Now what does it means change in structure. The structure basically means the composition of the members in a family. So, we will discuss in this lecture how it was earlier, say, a married couple unit, that is the both man and women were responsible for the functions of a family. With say income declining or poverty and there is a wide gap, there could be an increase in single motherhood, single fatherhood. So, single parenting is one instance of the change in the family structure. Now, if there is a single parent, does it have the same implication on the way gender socialization takes place? So, this is something which the authors are trying to investigate. Now, when we are talking about inequalities, we need to keep in mind that inequality has become more complex with large scale transformation and changes taking place, and there is an intricate relationship between different forms of inequality. So, we need to understand how these complexities have affected the way in which inequality has been conceptualized. Here the authors are referring to some of the major trends to understand the complexity of inequalities, and this reference is major to the USA context. So, the first trend which they argue is trend in single parenthood and income inequality over the past 50 years and the association between these trends. Another trend is in terms of looking into the relationship between race and class differences in family structure to measure the concentration of single parenthood in particular group. Reasons that income inequality may affect family structure with attention given to evidence of a causal link. So, the authors are arguing that there is a connection between the earning of the parent and the structure or the composition of the family. That is basically they are trying to raise a question, how family structure contributes to the reproduction of inequalities by creating barriers to upward mobility and by exacerbating pre-existing gender and racial disparity. So, that is why the authors are arguing that it is complex. Inequality as it was has kind of consistent, it has persistent in society, and the common forms of inequality, that is gender, race, class, have been re-strengthened. Further, when we talk about income kind is less, then the mobility upward, it will be a kind of restricted, and therefore, the chance of kind of having more kind of a egalitarian structure becomes problematic. The argument for family structure as a mechanism for the reproduction of inequality is germane to other countries as well. The extent to which family structure affect the reproduction of inequalities differ from country to country, but the pathways through which it operates are likely to be the same. So, we can have a kind of a universal understanding of the way in which family as an institution has further strengthened the forms of inequalities in society. McLennan and Persesky studied the change in the family formation, specifically in the US, and observed the various changes taking place. This literature is specifically pointing out to the changes in USA, but as already stated, these changes are to be found in other societies as well. Maybe there could be some kind of a little variance, but the argument is the same, that family has led to the strengthening of inequalities. So, the first of the change that has been observed is increase in the number of single parent family before reaching age of 18. So, the whole idea is that there is an increase in taking on the responsibility of someone at an early age, and that implies that the significance of marriage as an institution has kind of declined. So, the composition of single parent family has shifted dramatically since 1960 from widowed mothers to divorced mother and most recently never married mothers. So, this could be even in terms of gender neutral, that there are increasing cases of never married fathers. So, the single parent was earlier in times of dependent on marriage as an institution where there could be a divorce or a kind of a death of the partner. Now, because of reproductive technology, the increase in single parent has kind of become a common phenomena, and this is not only in the US, but other parts of the world as well. Increase in gender inequalities as mothers incur more child related costs and fewer fathers experience family life with children. So, on one side there is an increase in single parenthood across the gender. However, if we connect the increase in single parenthood with the gender of the parent, women are kind of going to incur a larger impact, because they have to kind of ensure that they become the earner as well as the nurturer of the child, whereas the less expectations from the father. However, the change is not uniform. Changes in family structure have not occurred uniformly across population. Subgroups, instead, these are notable differences by race and education, with increase in single motherhood most pronounced among the most disadvantaged group. So, the authors are arguing based on the data and the analysis that the family structure is not same across, say, the subgroup. The subgroup could be one criteria could be the race. The second criteria is educational level. So, those who are, say, from the black race, this is in the context of America, and are illiterate, the chances of being single parent is higher. Unmarried mothers account for nearly 2 in 3 births to mothers without a high school education, but only 9% of births to mothers with a college education. These educational differences in non-marital birth rate combined with differences in divorce and remarriage rate. So, they are kind of giving us statistics and data to kind of prove the argument that gender inequality is affected by the race and education level of the women. Now, what are the factors for variance? So, the argument is that gender inequality will differ from family of one particular race to a family of another race, and also in terms of the educational level. So, what are the factors which has been taken into account? The two factors which the authors have taken into account, one is the large time period examined and the extent to which researchers take other factors into account in their analysis. The second major source of variability in estimate is related to the modeling strategy. Family structure is correlated with other factors, and what are the other factors here? It is race or ethnicity and education, which are known to affect family income. So, there is a kind of a connection. What structure of the family or the composition of the family will depend on several other variables. One is your race, the second is education, and these two together, your race, education, impacts the income. The income of the family will directly then affect the structure of the family. Now, the choice of time period, that is over the studies have taken almost a very long period, that is 50 years of estimate, because macroeconomic trends such as recession and unemployment affect income inequality. That is why the period of study is longer. Martin, a scholar, published an article in 2006, argues that family structure explains more of the variance in family income in periods of low inequality growth and less of variance in periods of high growth. So, when the market is on a better side, then the variation will be less. In addition, a mechanical effect arises whereby studies using two endpoints display more variability compared with study averaging estimates over many years. So, these are some of the advantage and disadvantage of doing a time factor study or doing a comparison observation of society over a long period of time. But we will not focus so much on the methodology or the way in which data has been collected. Our focus is to understand social inequalities in its variant forms. So, we need to understand that family structure has led to gender inequality and racial inequality. Now, when we understand racial inequality, we will also look into how the identity of the mother makes a difference in terms of the inequality that she experiences. So, the racial difference in single motherhood are also striking. More than 2/3 of black children are born to unmarried mothers compared with less than 1/4 of white children and between 2/5 and 1/2 of Hispanic children. So, this data is focusing on the racial inequalities experienced, and family structure does not kind of reduce the experience of racial inequality. Racial differences in family structure cannot be accounted for solely difference in mother's educational attainment. The racial difference among less educated women are particularly striking. Between 1980s and 2000, the single motherhood rate among women with a high school education or less was over 30% points higher among black women than among white women. In contrast, Hispanic women without a high school education had lower rates of single motherhood than white women in 2000. Although the pattern of family structure by race and education is complex, the overall trend is clear. Advantaged women continue to raise the children in the context of marriage. So, the structure of the family, whether it be a conjugal unit or it will be a single parent, is largely dependent on several factors: income, race, education. So, what we need to basically kind to understand is find an answer to the question, does income inequality have a causal effect on family structure? So, we have till now discussed the association between the trends in single motherhood and income inequality. Let us now look at the theoretical and empirical evidence for income inequality causal effect on family, formation behavior, and how this may vary among women from different socio-economic background. So, the authors McLennan and Paskeski have argued that income inequality has led to delay in marriage among both advantaged and disadvantaged women, which should increase non-marital childbearing, all else being equal. So, income inequality may affect marriage in several ways. Number one, the inequality in men's wages increases the gain to women of searching for the best possible husband. So, now the authors are arguing that if it is both the husband and wife working, the structures of the family and inequality would be different. Now, if the men does not have employment, it kind of turns to the women to find out if it is, and then it could be kind of dependent on if women is sharing the income responsibility. Again, the relationship between the two would affect the way in which inequality is there in the family. As a result, women marry later when wage inequality is high. Studies found that increase in male wage inequality over time in geographically, educationally and racially defined marriage markets account for decline in marriage. Estimate says that difference in male wage inequality can account for approximately 25% of the decline in marriage over the past few decades. So, we are basically trying to understand the relationship between income inequality and marriage. So, earlier these were kind of considered as two domains, as belonging to the economic domain and the social domain. What the feminist and other more contemporary anthropologists and sociologists have tried to do is make a linkage between the called private and the public domain, and therefore the idea is that does change in the income of the family affect marriage. So, earning inequality not only increases the benefit of searching, it also makes it harder for low income couples to reach the marriage bar. Defined as the standard of living a couple is expected to obtain before they marry. Wage inequality may also make men in the bottom half of the income distribution less attractive as marriage partner. So, before the individual gets married and starts a family, the income and the earning of the individual, and because it is a gender kind of idea, the earning of the men is very important, that he should be at a level earning a certain amount, so that he can take on the responsibility of starting the family. So, men's employment become very significant in terms of the formation of family. So, despite the increase in women's employment, the male breadwinner role continues to be an important norm. So, this is a gender, the persistence of gender inequality, that even there is an increase in the employment of women outside the home, the primary task of employment is still on the men, and men are considered as breadwinner, whereas the women are considered as family makers. However, there is a connection between the two, and it kind of leads to gender inequality within the structures of the family. So, men who cannot meet the expectation associated with this role are likely to be deemed as failures by society, themselves and their partners. The most common version of this argument focuses on the negative consequences of job loss for marriage and the absolute decline in men's earning. Male unemployment and underemployment are major obstacles to marriage and stable family. So, the first thing that makes the man eligible for marriage is his earning, and that again has a consequence on the stability. If the income is stable, then the chances of the marriage becoming stable is higher. Delay in marriage, however, do not fully explain why women from disadvantaged backgrounds have children in the absence of marriage, whereas more advantaged women delay both marriage and children. To understand why some women would be willing to have children in the absence of marriage, we must first acknowledge the importance of motherhood for women's identity. Eden and Kefalas argue that although poor women view marriage as a luxury, they view motherhood as essential. They also believe in the ability to perform the role of mother and receive psychological benefit from taking care of children. Whereas most women in the United States place a high value on children, women with high skill and a college education have other possible sources of identity from which they can derive meaning and fulfillment. So, for them motherhood is not the sole identity. Not surprisingly, childlessness is much more common among higher educated women and women in professional occupation than less educated women. So, we have seen through this that there is an increasing inequality in women's earning, and this has a repercussion on the formation of the family and the stability of the family. So, income inequality, wage inequality, the men's employment are some of the main criteria on which the stability of family, on how the composition of family takes place. So, there has been increase in women employment. The earning capacity of men are more emphasized, and the men are considered to be sustainer of the family, whereas they are kind of likely to be considered as most important dimension in the marriage. So, the most common argument focuses on the negative consequence of job loss for marriage and the obsolete decline in men's earning. By this, we have understood the relationship between marriage, family structure, income inequality, and the integrated relation in which the family structure leads to the reproduction of inequality. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.